Good to go? Sorry, thanks. Getting ahead of myself. 6:30 p.m. Calling to order the Newmarket Budget Committee. All please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. I'll run through a quick roll call. Chris Blackstone is excused. Justin Lucer. Here. Jeff Boyd. Here. Carl Blackstone. Here. Brian Ward. Here. Scott Foster. Here. Danielle Honan. Here. Brian Rowley is here. So we'll open to the public at 6:30. Members of the public. And no members of the public will close the public session. And today we are having a presentation from the school on the proposed budget. And just a reminder to everybody, this is going to be primarily information to us, and then you'll have the opportunity to generate questions and get those over to Todd and the team by Friday morning, if I recall correctly.
Yeah, that would be great. But if you don't think of it until Monday, feel free to send them our way. We'll do the best we can to answer them.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Yeah. And then that's a good reminder, December 8th, we have the kind of Q&A session with both the town and the school. So thank you so much. All yours, Todd. Yep.
Well, first of all, thank you for the great work you guys do in helping us develop and implement our budgets. Whenever I start down this road, I feel like I'm always living in 3 budget cycles at the same time. So it's forgive me if I accidentally talk about 24-25 or 25-26. This is about 26-27. But it is interesting in the public school finance world. We're constantly in that process. In fact, one of the things that has been true, certainly for the 4 years that I've been here, we start talking budget development really right after the elections of the board in March. And then we usually have a retreat shortly thereafter, and then the board starts to talk about what are the things that they will support in a budget. So we spend a lot of time trying to get to a place where we have collaborative goals that drive it. And I'll talk about that in a second. Before I get into that, I did want to just take a minute to thank the members of my various leadership team and board members for coming tonight. They didn't have to be here, but they're here to show their support, so I do appreciate it. Andy Corman, our high school principal, Patty Warren's assistant superintendent, Erica McNeil, assistant services director, Gary Swanson, we all know, I don't need no introduction, Dave Riley, our facilities director, and Jason Carey, our IT director. All of these people have had an intimate role in the development of this budget, and obviously Jeff, sitting at the table, also had a significant role in the development of this budget.
I did get to vote.
So anyway, as I said, come on, why isn't it changing? Hillary. Oh, there we go. Never mind. We start by developing goals, and as I said before, we develop them in a collaborative manner. The goals that drove this budget process, the first one having a 4% increase on the operational side. We knew we had a new para contract that we were negotiating, and we also knew that we had significant health costs that we needed to absorb. So 4% seemed like a reasonable place as a starting point. So that was the first piece. The second goal we had was to make sure we supported ongoing school improvement efforts. You've heard me talk before. We have school growth plans at both buildings that drive the academic program and our goals to strengthen our program and better meet students. And so we make sure that the efforts we have there are funded. You've also heard me talk many times about our capital improvement plan. We want to make sure, thank you to the community for the $39 million investment in our schools, but we want to make sure we stay on top of that, and we want to make sure we fully maintain it and keep our buildings, as great as they were the day they opened. We do that in 2 ways, by the way. We have about $100,000 that's built into the regular operating budget, and then every year you probably remember a warrant article to make contributions to our trust funds for school improvement. So that's always a big thing. Maintaining competitive salaries across our organization, that's been a goal all along. One of the things that we have done over the years is to really do careful analysis of salaries that are offered around the region in all areas of our organization, because we want to make sure we're offering appropriate salaries so that we can get and keep good people. one of the things I was particularly struck by is our senior leadership team, with the exception of the unfortunate passing of Jana Mellon this past spring, we've been together for 4 years. And keeping a leadership team together for an extended period of time allows you to accomplish a lot more. And I would also point out that when we have openings in our IT department, when we have openings in our facilities department, we have opening for teachers, we are getting really high caliber people coming to work for us. And it is paying dividends, not just from the standpoint of people getting a more competitive salary, it's also giving us really high quality people, and we've been very fortunate for that. The other thing we try to do is we keep student needs at heart. In the last couple of years, you've heard us talk a lot about behavioral health, mental health needs of our students, and there's a request in this budget for repurposing of some positions to address some student mental health needs. And then, as always, whenever we are budgeting, we want to make sure we're responsible stewards of Newmarket's money. We don't want to spend a dollar unless we need to spend a dollar. And so we're very careful to make sure that when we are making decisions about how to use money, even after it's budgeted, by the way, we still continue to say, wait a minute, do we need to do this? So anyway, when I talk about staffing, I'll talk about that some more. So I like to start with the end, because this is the snapshot. And by the way, these are slides that are in the packet that you have there. I'll just tell you what pages they're on. This particular is page 12 of your budget handout. But this is really the summary of our proposed budget. In the lower right-hand corner, you see that 4.35% is circled. That's because that is the percent increase we're proposing for this upcoming year. That represents $1,272,979. If you look up, there's 3 numbers that are circled. I wanted to highlight those. At the top, the number circled, $514,147, is professional educational. That's the increased cost of the recently negotiated teacher contract. Basically, we negotiated a new contract for our teachers, and that's what it costs. You have 109 people covered by that contract, and that's the salary increases that came from that. In the middle, you see under benefits, $704,890. That's the up in health insurance for this year. And you'll hear me talk about this in multiple settings. Health insurance and increased health insurance costs is probably one of the biggest narratives of this budget this year. You may recall a couple of months ago when I was here talking to you, we talked about a health assessment that we got after the school year began. We received a health assessment from our healthcare provider, School Care, for $417,000. That was on top of already having had to absorb an additional $152,000 because of increased costs back in the spring when we were forced to stay with School Care. All told, that's $570,000 that was not budgeted for when we got the 25-26 budget increase. We had to make sure we could account for that in 26-27. So that number is big, but it's to absorb those costs. And then on the really positive side, I do want to go down to the tuition line. You'll see a down of $248,316. That's just a direct shout out to Erica and her team for the great work they do in student services. We really carefully try to make sure that we budget to student need. And so we're constantly trying to do as much as we can to meet student needs with it in-house. And fortunately, we've been able to reduce the number of out-of-district placements, and therefore we've been able to budget lower. So that $248,000, a large chunk of that is due to Erica's great work. That and the community has supported us in increasing the trust fund that we have for special education. Last spring, the voters approved $65,000 going into it, so now we have a trust fund of $425,000 in the event that we have unpredicted costs. But the bottom line is we were able to cut back in that line. The other part of the tuition line is also SST. SST is the STICO School of Technology. One of the things that we had observed 3 years ago was a large number of kids were choosing to go to SST, and not necessarily because they were pursuing a program there. It was like they were bored and they were looking for other alternatives. One of the things that we've been able to do is do more in-house. So more kids are choosing to stay with programs in-house, take dual credit courses that are offered for college credit and so forth. And as a result, the number of kids going to SST has dropped a little bit, which actually saves the district money and is just as engaging for those students. So I think that's a positive story to tell. So anyway, bottom line, 4.35. And again, we had set the goal of 4%, but given the health insurance issues, 4.35 in my mind is a very good place for us to be. So where does this go? This chart kind of gives you the overall picture. Clearly about 69% is people, salaries and benefits. Debt service is that $39 million bond that I was just referencing. We pay $2.1 million every year for debt, and that goes through the year 2046. So when we start building our budget every year, we start with knowing we have a $2.1 million bond. And that actually, it says 7%, but it's actually more like 7.5%. And then operations is, I guess you could use the term discretionary, but it's really not. It includes transportation, it includes food service, it includes the lights, it includes the resources we use to run all our programs. So when you really get down to what does the district have significant ability to maneuver, to manage our costs, one is people, the number of people you hire, and there's a very small amount which is operational. The truth, though, of the matter is that it doesn't matter if you have 10 kids or 1,000 kids, the cost of turning the lights on is the same. So there's just something to keep in mind. This gives you sort of a historical perspective on the budget. You'll see last year we came in at 1.97%. I want to remind you, I've said it already twice, but I'll say it a third time. We voted on the new teacher's contract separate from that. So if you add the cost of the teacher contract, which the total was $697,000, it actually puts last year at 4.4%, which is right in line with where we were the year before that and where we're proposing to come in this year. You can see, though, that it's fairly consistent where the district has been over the last 5 or 6 years, typically in that 4 to 5% range. Something to keep in mind for 26, 27, as I mentioned, we do have a para contract that is being, we're almost ready to have an agreement on it. We still have to resolve some health insurance issues. But even after the para contract has been passed, the paras are a much smaller employment group, so it's nowhere near as impactful as the teacher contract was. The difference for the teacher contract on top is like 0.4%. So even with the cost of the para contract, you're looking at 4.7, 4.75 total increase. Obviously, enrollment is one thing that we always take a look at when we're building our budget. You can see in the last 5 years, we've had a fairly stable in the high 900s numbers. One of the things that's very, very interesting in Newmarket is we have this unusual pattern of up years and down years. So if you look, particularly, you can see it in kindergarten. It drives Sean Pine crazy. You can see in 2021, we had 63 kindergartners. The next year, we had 84. The next year, we had 67. The next year, we had 85. You can see it goes up, down, up, down. So accurately projecting how many kindergartners is very challenging. Last year, we actually thought we were going to be able to reduce by 1 kindergarten position because if the number 65 held, we felt confident we could have 4 teachers, and then 88 kids signed up, and it kind of changed our thinking. But overall, you can see the numbers are pretty stable. We do have projections done by NESDEC, which is it's an organization, the New England School Development Council. They do enrollment projections for schools all over New England. And they project our numbers in the 970 to 990 range to hold true through 2035. So for the next 10 years, they're projecting the numbers we're talking about now are likely to continue. One of the things that you're going to see this year in the budget process is, in fact, our actual ballot. There's a law passed that requires us to put the per pupil expenditure on our ballot along with our assessment scores. So before people vote on the operating budget, there'll be a box there with basic information. So I wanted to take a minute to talk about per pupil cost in Newmarket in particular. In fact, I think this came up as a question from this group last year to get me to look at it. The column in the middle is Newmarket's average per pupil cost. And just to reiterate, per pupil cost is not taking the total budget and dividing it by the number of kids. You remove the cost of transportation, you remove the cost of food service, and you remove the cost of out-of-district placement tuitions, and then you do the average. Because if you don't do that, districts that have like a lot more cost in transportation or have a higher percentage of kids who are in need of free and reduced lunch get negatively impacted by that. So those are removed out, plus those are sources of federal and state grant revenue that generally cover those costs. So everything else is thrown into the average. You can see in Newmarket, in the last 3 years, we have really worked to try to control per pupil cost. You can see in 22-23, we're at $22,866. 23-24, we were at $23,269. And for the year just completed, we're at $23,631. The state has not released 24-25 data yet for the state, so I can't tell you how we compare, but I can tell you this. In the last 3 years, Newmarket's per pupil cost has been going up at a rate of about 1.8%. The state has been going up between 5 and 6%. So if that trend continues, I would anticipate the state average to be somewhere around 22.5. So we're getting, my point here is the Newmarket per pupil cost is getting closer and closer to the state average. And again, I know I'm like a broken record on this whole bond thing, but it's important to realize that the choice, which was a great choice, I'm not saying this because I think it was a bad decision, but the choice in a single town district to take on a $39 million bond proportionally is more impactful than in a much larger district. So if you remove the bond costs from our per pupil cost, which I know that that's a fallacious argument because it's a real cost, but you can see our per pupil costs are actually below state average for everything else. So not for nothing, that it's important for people to know that bond costs or the failure of the state to provide aid to building is having a long-term impact on Newmarket. So as long as we're paying this bond off and not getting state aid for it, we're falling further and further behind. So it's just something to keep in mind. But anyway, my point here is I think Newmarket is doing a very good job of managing per pupil costs, and we're really trying to keep that in mind, and we're very aware of it as we make decisions about staffing and everything. So staffing, one of the things that I've talked to you about many times when it comes to staffing, whenever there's a position that is unfilled or it becomes vacant, we start with the question, do we need to fill that position as it is currently constituted? If the answer is no, the next question is there another need that we have already identified that might be better suited by repurposing this position? If the answer to that is no, then we don't fill the position. And you can see going back to 21, 22, all the way forward, over the last 5-6 years, we have reduced total staffing in the district by over 9%. And I would argue that you probably can't see a difference in terms of the service to students and the experience that our kids are getting. What we're doing at every time we have an opportunity to have the conversation, we take a look at student numbers, we take a look at what our goals are, and we try to staff accordingly. For this year, we are, you can see we're proposing in terms of FTEs, which is how you measure, FTE stands for full-time equivalent. That's the way that the Department of Ed sort of measures staffing levels. You can see we're proposing a reduction of a 0.4 FTE. But what we're really doing is there's 2.4 FTEs that were going to be vacant, and we are proposing repurposing 2 of those for a couple of positions, which I'll talk about in just a minute. But my point is, it's not like we're saying, let's create a new position, and oh, by the way, let's also fund it from an additional cost. What we're doing is we're looking internally and saying, okay, what is the most important priority? Let's make sure that when we are doing that, we do that first. And in this case, we have what we consider to be a very good proposal to repurpose those positions to meet some student mental health needs. So, speaking to that, I think tonight's going to be the night of me giving lots of shout-outs to Erica, because she's been involved in this. I think I talked to you guys about this last spring. We had applied for and were given a mental health grant through Community Mental Health. It was supposed to be a 5-year grant with $150,000 per year for 5 years. And as you know, federal grant funding got a little wonky over the last year. And so at first they told us, nope, you're not going to get the money. And then they said, well, maybe you're going to get the money. And then they said, nope, you're not going to get the money. And then finally, around August, they said, hey, guess what? We're going to give you $275,000. Here's the catch. You got to use it by December 31st of 2025. Now, keep in mind that generally when you build a budget, you have a plan for what you're going to do. So to be able to use that money was very challenging for us. But to kind of back up to why we applied for the grant in the first place, we recognized a need that we needed in our district, and we needed to take a look, K to 12 or pre-K to 12, at the behavioral health, mental health needs of our students, and develop practices across the system to support kids that are having regulatory challenges and things of that sort. Because one of the things, if you talk to teachers, particularly in the early grades, they're dealing with behaviors that I think are very challenging to manage. Kids that are having difficulty regulating their emotions, kids that are having a hard time functioning in a classroom environment. We recognize the need to address that. So what we have proposed is to take the 2.4 FTEs that we had previously had assigned to a variety of other positions and repurpose them to 2 positions that we think will address this. One is adding a school counselor at the elementary school. Right now, Newmarket Elementary has 1 school counselor, and there are 486 or so kids over there. Best practice is 1 counselor for every 250 kids. Next year, we're projecting around 500 at the elementary school. Again, the whacked out kindergarten numbers setting aside. If the number stays true, we're going to be around 500, which means we really need 2 counselors in that building to fully meet the needs of those kids. So one part of this proposal is to repurpose one of the positions to be a counselor at the elementary school. And the other position is a new position, which was what we were hoping to get from the grant in the first place, was what's called an MTSSB coach. And that person would be a district employee whose job it is to help facilitate the development of all of these behavioral health systems, to track data, and to build this system across the school district so that we can better meet student needs. And what we find our biggest challenge is we don't have the internal expertise sometimes to be able to do it on a daily basis. Typically what we're doing is we're hiring consultants and bringing them in from a variety of other places. And we believe this is the right way to go about doing that. So what we've done is repurpose 2.4 positions to 2 positions that we believe meet a need that has been long identified in the district, and it's an opportunity to be able to do that without significant impact on the bottom line. So moving from that position, I did want to take a minute to talk about adequacy. This chart is also in the packet you have. It's on page 14 in your packet if you want to take a look at it. One of the things that is crazy making in New Hampshire is we all know that the vast majority of the cost of public education is coming out of the pockets of locals, okay? In fact, Steve Fournier never ceases to remind me of the fact that 72% of the tax rate is the school district. And so I'm very, very aware, and he does that with a very firmly, tongue-in-cheek, he's just saying, just remind me here and there. So I know it is an impact. But one of the things that I think is hard for people to understand is that we do not have significant other dependable sources of revenue at the district level. This chart shows you state aid. State aid, we get, the top of this chart is the kind of orangey color, or whatever, peach, whatever color that is. That is grant aid. That means money that the state raises and gives to Newmarket that I don't have to pass on to Newmarket taxpayers. The bottom, the blue, is SWEPT, and we all know SWEPT is the statewide education property tax. Basically, what does it do? The state comes in and says, collect $1.11 from every member of your, per thousand for everybody. Okay, take that money and put it in your other pocket, and we'll call that state aid, but it's effectively being collected locally. This chart really shows you a couple of things. One, you can see that the grant aid, the top, has not changed a bit in 3 years. And I would challenge anybody to go out and buy anything and offer to pay what the price was 3 years ago. And what's happening is, from the state perspective, by not increasing it, by leaving it level, it's effectively a cut, because everything has gone up. And then you'll see the bottom, the swept, that number has remained steady. Good news, this year it's about 35,000 less than previous years, so I guess that's good. That's 35,000 less being collected locally. But the aid coming from the state is definitely not keeping up with everything else. So this chart really kind of shows you that. You may recall back in 2023-24, it was a much worse problem because the state really reduced the net grant aid dramatically, and we got $2.6 million that year, but they increased swept pretty dramatically. So what happened that year was people had sticker shock on their taxes, because we can talk all we want about 4.35%, but in the end, it's where are your revenues coming from? And that's what's going to show up in people's tax bills. So I think this is an important slide to keep in mind. Kind of cutting to the next piece, I did want to remind you as a team that we do have other warrant articles that will likely be on the warrant. I wanted to just take a minute to remind you of those. Obviously, we'll be electing district officers. We will have the proposed operating budget, which obviously we'll be talking about tonight and next week. There will be a para contract that will be proposed as a warrant article, and there will likely be a couple of contributions to trust funds. The board hasn't actually settled on a strategy for that, whether we would be doing it from year-end fund balances, so therefore it's not asking for additional money, or doing it in terms of an appropriations article. But those are all the things that will be likely on the warrant alongside of this operating budget. And then just lastly, because I like to share this information with everybody, one of the things that we have done a lot in the last few years, I mentioned it when I talked about the capital improvement plan, I mentioned it when we talked about student services. We have really done a lot of work on our trust funds, and actually the trustees of the trust funds have done a lot of work on trust funds. So the amount of money we're making in interest now is so much better, and every chance I get, I say thank you to the trustees of the trust funds for their effort on that. But these are the balances of all of our current trust funds. The ones that I talked about tonight, the School Improvement Capital Reserve Fund is the one that we use. It's the fourth one down. That's the one we will use going forward to pay for all projects, like we did multiple roof replacements at the high school this year, windows at the elementary school, stuff like that. And you'll also see the balance of the Special Education Trust Fund is up to $438,535, which is a very healthy amount. And Eric and I talk about this all the time, but that represents roughly the equivalent of a low, middle, and a high cost of an out-of-district placement, so effectively 3 kids. And you can see we have multiple other balances. The one at the top, the Insurance and Benefits Expendable Trust Fund, currently there's $132,048 in it, but we are going to be using that to pay down the health insurance assessment that we just got. So that is going to be depleted. So anyway, that's what I have to offer to you, and so I will turn to, are there any questions you would like to ask of me? Now, I know there's multiple pages I didn't talk about, but I figure you can read that and you can ask me next week, okay? Any questions for now? Yes?
Would you look at potentially partnering with like Seacoast or Lamprey around the social work position rather than hire yourself?
We actually do quite a bit of partnering. In fact, the grant that we were supposed to have gotten was actually a partnership with Community Mental Health. That was the intention of it. Okay. It is challenging to do that in a way that is fully meets our needs, but we actually have how many Seacoast mental health counselors do we have working in our,
2 different counselors. I think if I added them up, it's like 4 total between the 2 buildings.
yeah, so we do to some extent, we're always looking for opportunities to do that, but it has proven to be challenging. And to be honest, many times when we have a position that's in that realm, like the MTSSB coach, finding a qualified person who's willing to do it for the salary we can offer is challenging. So we hope to be able to find someone for that role.
Yeah.
Yeah. Stunned silence.
Very informative as always, Todd. Thank you very, very much. Appreciate
Yes,
it.
so obviously I'm back here on Monday.
Yes.
I did not spend a lot of time talking about the elementary school program and plan, but frankly, there's not a lot of budgetary impact of what's happening there. And I didn't spend a lot of time talking about the junior, senior high school's plans, but certainly it's in the narrative and you can certainly read that. And again, I'd be happy to answer questions about anything to do with that and any other program questions you might have. So I'll see you next Monday.
Yeah, and I know we've already gotten some email questions coming in, so
Perfect.
so I think we'll get those over to you as quick as we can, and
Perfect.
appreciate the great overview and coming in.
And just to acknowledge, Bryant Lee was not able to be here tonight. He was traveled for Thanksgiving and is getting back, but he will be here next Monday night to help answer questions.
So, thank you so much.
Great, thank you.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
Thanks, Todd.
Okay. And so the next item would be to have approved the minutes from the last meeting. I apologize, it seems like we don't have the minutes printed here, so I wouldn't want to ask you to be reviewing and approving them. Are we all comfortable with reviewing them at the meeting on the 8th, December 8th?
Yes.
Okay, so we'll take that approach, I think, and get those and get this meeting's minutes then and make sure that we have all the printouts ready to go. Unless there's anything else, would we have a motion? Oh, Brian?
Just remind everyone, there's a big snowstorm tomorrow, so just if you haven't grabbed some food, run down, grab some food, or some water and all that stuff. So.
Good idea, good
Yeah.
plan for sure. Newberry, we'll all see each other
Yeah.
in Newberry soon after this. So, awesome.
That's right.
Unless there's anything else, is there a motion to adjourn?
I'll make the motion.
All right, Brian Ward made the motion to adjourn,
Second.
seconded by Justin Lutzer. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye, unanimous approval. Thank you all so much. Appreciate you guys coming out.